In this video, I'm going through GED grade 11 advanced semester 1, and it's the practice paper, the shadow paper. So for the equation 4x squared plus 6x minus k equals 0, what values of k will give two real solutions? So two real solutions means that b squared minus 4ac is bigger than 0. Remember, if it's one solution, it's smaller than 0, it's equal to 0. And if it is no solutions, it's smaller than 0. Okay, so this is A, this is B, and C is negative k. So substituting in, we have 6 squared minus 4 times A, which is 4, times C, which is negative k, all is bigger than 0. So 36 minus negative 16k, which is what this is, negative 16k, is bigger than 0. Those two together directly next to each other make a plus, so this is 36 plus 16k is bigger than 0. I'm going to move the 36 by subtraction, so 16k is bigger than negative 36. I'm going to divide by 16, so k is bigger than negative 36 over 16, which is negative 9 over 4. So k is bigger than negative 9 over 4. The second question says, consider the function x squared minus 9. Determine the range of this function. So to determine the range, and we don't have specific values for the domain, the best thing to do is to sketch the graph. So we know that this is the y-intercept, where the graph cuts the y-axis. We also know that this can be factorized by, that's the difference between two squares. So I can factorize it, x plus 3, x minus 3, therefore x equals negative 3 and x equals 3. These are my x-intercepts. So for a graph like this, the y-intercept is also going to be the turning point. So a quick sketch, the graph would look something like this, negative 3, 3, this is 9. And the range is the values for y. Of course, this is x, this is y. And you can see that the values for y are bigger than 9. So the range, f of x, is bigger than 9. Determine the remainder when f of x equals, when the function is 3x cubed minus 4x squared plus 5x minus 6 is divided by x plus 1. Now, yes, this is divided by x plus 1, however, they don't specifically ask you to use long division, so you can still use the factor theorem. So you're going to substitute the opposite. If it says plus 1, you're going to substitute negative 1. So this is 3 times negative 1 cubed minus 4 times negative 1 squared plus 5 times negative 1 minus 6. And when you use your calculator, you put it in exactly how you see it. So negative 1 cubed minus, you don't add any extra signs or anything like that. You just copy it exactly as you have written it. And you're going to get negative 18. So the remainder is negative 18. That's all you need to say. Or even remainder is negative 18. Question 4 basically asks you to differentiate to find dy over dx. So you're going to multiply the power by the coefficient. So this is 30x to the power of 5, because you're going to subtract 1 from the power. This is 2 times negative 2, so negative 4x, and the constant disappears. So our final answer is this one. Question 5 says the ages of a group of students are listed. Find the median and the interquartile range. The first thing you need to do is put them in order. So you have to put them in order first. So 9, I have 10 and 10. I have an 11. I have 3 12s. Make sure that you're crossing them out so that you don't miss one out or add something by mistake. 13, 14, and 15. The median is very simple to find because I cross them out, one from each side. I end up with 2 at the middle, but they're actually the same 2. If they weren't the same 2, you would add them up and divide by 2. But the median is 12. Now, how many numbers do we have? I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So to find the upper quartile, which is Q3, I do 0.75 times 10, which is the 7.5th or the 8th value. And the 8th value is 13. That's the 8th number. And you always round up, whether this is a 0.5 or below. And Q1, the lower quartile, is 0.25 times 10, which is the 2.5th or the 3rd value. And that's 10. Therefore, the interquartile range is 13 minus 10, which is 3. So let's put it here, 12 and 3. And question 6, given that the function 2x squared plus 12x plus 5, rewrite in completed the square form, so complete the square. The first thing you need to do is you need to divide by the coefficient of x squared, whatever that coefficient is. So it's not like we're always dividing by 2, but you always divide by the coefficient of x squared and you put it outside a big bracket. So now we have x squared plus 6x plus 5 over 2. And then you complete the square, which means that you pick on the coefficient of x and you divide that by 2 and only 2. So, and this gives you your bracket squared, always x, not x squared. 6 divided by 2 is a positive 3. Whatever the number is, and I'm talking about the digit, I'm not talking about the sign because we're going to square it. You always subtract, it's always a minus, always a minus. It's always the digit squared. And then you're going to bring that number down. If this is a positive, so it stays a positive, plus 5 over 2, close your brackets. And then you are going to put this in your calculator, including the minus. The minus is really important. So you put it exactly as you have written it, minus brackets 3 squared plus 5 over 2. And it's a negative 13 over 2. So 2x plus 3 squared minus 13 over 2. And your final step is you're going to multiply the 2 in by both parts. Now, you're multiplying the 2 by a double bracket, so the double bracket doesn't change. All you do is you write it next to the bracket. And then 2 times negative 13 over 2 is negative 13. And you have completed the square. Given that the function f of x is x squared and g of x is x plus 4 squared minus 3. Describe the transformation that maps f of x onto g of x and draw a sketch of g of x marking the coordinate of the vertex. Okay, so probably a good idea is to just sketch the original graph. And x squared is a quadratic that goes through 0, 0. Then you can see that g of x is a transformation. Now, this is a transformation inside the brackets, so it only affects the x coordinate, and it does the opposite. So if this says plus 4, what you're doing is you're going to subtract 4 from the x coordinate. And this one is a transformation outside the bracket. So it's in the y coordinate only, it affects the y coordinate only, and it does exactly what it says. So it's a minus 3. So 0 minus 4 is negative 4, and 0 minus 3 is negative 3. So you're going to have a coordinate for the turning point that's going to be somewhere there. So negative 4, negative 3. And it says marking the coordinate of the vertex, and the vertex is the turning point. So I have sketched my graph, and then I need to also say what has happened. So it's moved left by 4 and down by 3. So it's a translation. 4 to the left in the x-axis, and it's also a translation. 3 down in the y-axis. Question 8 gives you a function, and it says given that x squared plus 4x minus 5, and it's factorized it for you, select the statement that would show that x squared plus 4x minus 5 is a factor. So if these are factors, that means when I substitute 1 and when I substitute negative 5, it's always the opposite of what's inside the bracket. When I substitute these, I get a remainder 0. So I want 1 and negative 5. So when I substitute 1 and I substitute negative 5, I get a remainder 0. A curve has this equation. It says using calculus differentiation, find the x coordinates of the stationary points of the curve. So your step 1 is to differentiate 3x squared, so power times number and then subtract 1 from power, minus 2x minus 40. And then to find the coordinates of the turning points, you need to make that equation equal to 0. So equate it to 0 and then solve it. Now, you can solve it by factorizing, you can solve it by the quadratic formula, you can solve it by putting it into the solver as well. So that's, let's see, where's my solver? Equation, so 5, ax squared plus bx plus c. So 3, negative 2, b is negative 2, minus 40, and you get x equals 4, and you press equals again, and you get negative 10 over 3. So I'm going to factorize. This is 3x plus 10. This is x minus 4. X equals negative 10 over 3. X equals a positive 4. And I have found the x coordinates of the stationary points. This is data, and it says find the median, which is the middle value. So you need a cumulative frequency column. And we start with 10, and then we add 7. So I have 17. And then we add 2, and we get 19. And we add 3, and we get 22. And we add 1, so we get 23. So that's my cumulative frequency column. And then to find the median, it's the total frequency, which is the last value in your cumulative frequency. If I were to add them all up, they would give me 23. So 23 divided by 2, which gives us the 11.5th value, which I round up. I want the 12th value. Well, this is 1 to 10. This is 11 to 17. So the 11th value is in this group. It's in the 1 to 2 group. So that is the class, the group where the median lies. This says very clearly divide the function by x minus 6, stating the quotient and the remainder. So 3x cubed minus 20x squared plus 10x plus 5 by x minus 6. You always compare your x's. What do you multiply x by to give you 3x cubed? Well, you multiply it by 3x squared. And then whatever you put at the top, you're going to multiply by x, and you're going to multiply by the negative 6. So this is 3x squared and then minus 18x, this is 3x cubed minus 18x squared. And I always put it in bracket, and I always put a minus sign. They give me 0, and then you have negative 20, and that's minus 18, which makes a plus. So negative 20 plus 18 is negative 2x squared. Then I'm moving the plus 10 down, so plus 10x. And then what do I multiply x by to give me negative 2x squared? I multiply it by negative 2x. Then I multiply the negative 2x back by the x. And I multiply it by the negative 6, which gives me plus 12x. I put that into brackets. I put my minus. Those are going to disappear. And then 10 minus 12 gives me negative 2x again. I'm going to bring the 5 down. What do I multiply the x by to give me negative 2x? I multiply by negative 2. Then I multiply that by x and negative 6. So negative 2 times x, negative 2x. Negative 2 times negative 6 plus 12. Put it in brackets. Put my minus. Those give me a 0. 5 minus 12 is negative 7. So that is the quotient, and that is the remainder. So that's what you would put here. You would put quotient 3x squared minus 2x minus 2, remainder negative 7, or r equals negative 7. For what range is this function decreasing? So decreasing, you see a graph that is sloping down. So from about here to there, the graph is sloping down. So this is from negative 2 to 2. So the graph is decreasing from negative 2 to 2. And this is a grouped frequency table, and it says find the estimated mean. So this is the mean, and you need two extra columns. You need the midpoint, which is x, and you need the frequency times the midpoint, f of x. So the midpoint here, you always add them up. So add the two numbers up and divide by 2. And if you're going to do it in a calculator, you need to make sure that you put these in brackets. That will give you the right answer. But this is quite easy. The midpoint between 0 to 10 is 5. 10 to 20 is 15, 20 to 30, 25, 30 to 40, 35, 40 to 50, 45. And then you have your frequencies. You need to multiply each one by the frequency. So this is 5 times 5, which is 25. This is 15 times 12, which is 180. This is 25 times 10, which is 250. This is 35 times 5, which is 175. And this is 45 times 1, which is 45. And you need to find the total frequency, which is 33. You also need to find the sum of f of x, which is 675, and then the mean is 675 divided by the total frequency, which is 20.45, and I've rounded to 2 decimal places. It doesn't really tell you what to do, so you can round to 1 or 2 decimal places, 20.45. This says what is the coordinate of the vertex. Again, this is the turning point. So to find the turning point, you can do one of two things. You can complete the square, or you can differentiate, make it equal to 0, and find that. So you can have, if we complete the square, divide by 2. So this is x minus 3 squared minus 3 squared plus 2. Now, again, get your calculator and put minus 3 squared plus 2 gives you negative 7. So this is x minus 3 squared minus 7. This is the opposite. So this gives me a positive 3. This stays the same. So it is a positive 3 minus 7. Or you can differentiate 2x minus 6 equal to 0. X equals, and that's 6 over 2, 3. And then to find y, you would substitute 3 into your original equation, and you will get negative 7. This says solve the inequality. You can use the quadratic formula. You can factorize. So let's have a look. x and x, 7 and 1, minus and minus. So your critical values, you have to really draw a graph. X equals 1, x equals 7. So that's the critical values, 1 and 7. And it says it's less than 0, so it's that part. So you write it as one equation or one inequality, x is bigger than 1 and smaller than 7. Which of these graphs is not a function? You need to use the vertical line test. So this cuts in one place, cuts in one place, cuts in one place, cuts twice. That is not a function. So if it cuts twice, not a function. Which is the graph of the modulus of 3x plus 2? So we need to have a look at a few things. Firstly, where does the graph cut the y-axis? It cuts at y equals 2. And then you need to find the x-intercept. So 3x plus 2 equals 0. So x equals negative 2 over 3. So it's a negative, and 2 over 3, if you put it into your calculator, negative 2 over 3, that is negative 0.6. So, it could be this, because that's a negative, and it's smaller than 1, but it doesn't cut at 2, this cuts at 1, so that's not going to work. This cuts at 2, but cuts exactly at negative 1, so that's not going to work. This one, definitely not going to work, cuts at negative 1. Look at this one, this cuts at, looks like negative 0.6 and cuts at 2, so that one is going to work. So you have to find where the y-intercept is, where the x-intercept is, and work out which one is the modulus graph. The curve C has equation y equals 2x squared minus 4x plus 12. Find the equation of the normal to C at the point where on C where x equals negative 1. So the first thing you need to do is to differentiate, and you're finding the gradient of the tangent when you do. So this is 4x minus 4, and at x equals negative 1, 4 times negative 1 minus 4 equals negative 8. That is the gradient of the tangent. So gradient of the tangent. Therefore, the gradient of the normal is the negative reciprocal. So when one of them is a minus, the other one is a plus. And therefore, this is a positive 1/8. And then I want to find the equation of the normal. So at x, so the first thing I need to do is find a y coordinate for that. So I'm going to put it back into the equation to find y. Y equals 2 times negative 1 squared minus 4 times negative 1 plus 12, which is 18. So my coordinate is at negative 1, positive 18, and I'm going to use y equals mx plus c. So y is 18 equals 1/8 times negative 1 plus c. So this is 18 equals negative 1/8 plus c. So I need to add, that's what I'm doing, I'm adding 1/8 there. So C equals 145 over 8. So now I have y equals 1/8 x plus 145 over 8. Just to make this a little neater, times 8 times 8 times 8, and I have 8y equals 1x plus 145. The cumulative frequency graph shows information about the lengths in minutes of 80 telephone calls. Use the graph to find the number of calls which were longer than 15 minutes. So 15 minutes is here. You need to be as accurate as you can. Okay. And longer is that part. So I need to work out the scale. There's 10 squares up to 20, so each one is 2. So I've got 62, 64, 66, 68, 70, and that looks like 71. And therefore, because it's in the middle of a square, so 71. So 80 minus 71 is 9. Ron wants to solve this pair of simultaneous equations by substitution. And it tells you that x equals 3y. So I substitute 3y into every x. So this is 3y squared minus 6 times 3y plus 7. So 3y squared, that's 3 squared y squared, 9y squared, minus 6 times 3, 18y plus 7. So 9y squared minus 18y plus 7. That's correct. Given the function the square root of 4x minus 9, which of these inequalities is the domain? The first thing I would do is find what's excluded. Anything inside the square root cannot be negative. Therefore, 4x minus 9 cannot be smaller than 0, which means that x cannot be smaller than 9 over 4. That's what's excluded. Therefore, what's included is the opposite of that. X is bigger than or equal to 9 over 4. Y equal, because 0 is allowed inside the square root. So x is bigger than or equal to 9 over 4. Okay, so we've got to find the values of the constants a, b, and c. And you've got a quadratic at the top and a quadratic at the bottom, which means that one of these values potentially is going to cancel out, and they've made it very clear that that's going to happen. And so what I would do first is I would compare or divide the coefficients of x squared to get a. A equals, at the top I've got 4x squared, and at the bottom, when you multiply x times 2x, you get 2x squared. So that's basically what you've got at the top. X squared divided by x squared cancels. 4 divided by 2 equals 2. So a equals 2. So the first thing I would do is find the constant. Then I would answer normally. So I'm going to put the numerator and I will equate that to b. times the denominator, 2x minus 5, plus c times the opposite denominator. And I'm going to take x equals 3 and I'm going to substitute it in. So 4 times 3 squared plus 2 times 3 plus 2. When x equals 3, the opposite of negative 3, this is a 0. And I'm going to substitute it in here as well. So this is 2 times negative 3 minus 5. 2 times 3, which is 6 minus 5, which is 1. So b, 1b equals all of that. b equals 44. And then I'm going to do the same thing, but with this. So how do I find what x is? I would say this equals to 0, so this gives me 2x equals 5, x equals 5 over 2. So when x equals 5 over 2, I'm going to substitute that in again. 4 times 5 over 2 squared plus 2 times 5 over 2 plus 2. Of course, this is now 0, and I'm going to substitute 5 over 2 minus 3. And this gives me negative a half c. So negative a half c equals 32. Divide 32. So 32 divided by negative a half. So it gives me c equals negative 64. So a is 2, b is 44, and c is negative 64. And this says differentiate with respect to x. So this is the chain rule. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to multiply by the power, so 5 over 2 times. Then you're going to differentiate the bracket. When you differentiate the bracket, you're basically differentiating that bit. So this is 3x squared times the bracket, unchanged, to the power, and you're going to do a minus 1, 3 over 2. So 5 over 2 times 3 becomes 15 over 2x squared times the brackets to the power of 3 over 2, and that's what you need to write over here. The summary data for variable y, and they give you what you need. Find the standard deviation to 3 significant figures. The first thing I would do is actually find the mean of y, which is the sum of y divided by n. So 35 divided by 10 is 3.5. And then the standard deviation is the square root, and it's y squared over n minus the mean all squared. And that's going to give you 3.51425, la da 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 da, etc., etc. And I've got 1, 2, 3, that's 3 significant figures. The 4 does not round up, so to 3 significant figures, 3.51. This question, the first thing I would do is to turn the square root into a power. 3x minus 4x to the power of a half equals 0. This is a power of a 1. Now, what this is a disguised quadratic, because 1 and a half is double. So something like x squared and x, that's a quadratic. That is double of this. And this one is double of a half. So this is a disguised quadratic. So I'm going to use use slightly different letters, and I'm going to say let b equals root x. therefore b squared equals x. So what I actually have now is 3b squared, because that's x is b squared, minus 4b equals 0. Clearly that's a quadratic that I can solve by factorizing, and all I need to do is factorize the b out, and it leaves me with 3b minus 4 equals 0. So either b equals 0 or 3b minus 4 equals 0. So 3b equals 4 and b equals 4/3. But b is actually root x. So this means, therefore, root x equals 0. To reverse the root, I square. Squaring both gives me x equals 0. Or root x equals 4/3. Therefore, if I square both, because that's how you get rid of the square root, you square, it gives me x equals 16/9. So your answer is x equals 0 or x equals 16/9. And it says the graph of y equals is shown on the grid. On the same grid, draw the graph of a half x minus 1. So a half times x is inside the bracket. So this means that you're multiplying by a half, and instead you can divide by a half all the x coordinates. So this only affects the x coordinates, and you need to divide by a half rather than multiply by a half. This only affects the y coordinates, and it does what it says. So this is minus 1. And I would pick on the coordinates that have whole numbers. So this coordinate is -3, 3. This is -2, 1. This one is 0, 3. That one is 1, 4. And that one is 3, 4. These would be the coordinates that I would do this for. So -3, 3. -3 divided by a half is -6. And 3 minus 1 is 2. And then -2, 1 becomes -4 and 0. 0, 3 becomes 0, 2. 1, 4 becomes 2, 3. And 3, 4 becomes 6, 3. Okay, so each x coordinate I'm multiplying by 2, which is basically what dividing by a half is. And each y coordinate I'm subtracting 1. And then I plot my new coordinates. -3, 3 becomes -6, 2. And then I have -4, 0. And I have 0, 2. And I have 2, 3. And I have 6, 3. And then connect them. Please connect them with a ruler. So make sure you connect them with a ruler. This says solve the inequality. and it's a modulus inequality, so you have to solve it twice. The first one is simply 4x minus 2 is smaller than 10, and the second one is negative 4x minus 2 in brackets is smaller than 10. So this is 4x is smaller than 12, which is x is smaller than 3. And then this is going to be negative 4x plus 2 is smaller than 10. So negative 4x is smaller than 8. And then you're going to divide by a negative. Dividing by a negative changes the inequality sign. So this becomes x is bigger than negative 2. So x is smaller than 3 and x is bigger than negative 2, which is this one. We can write them, combine them. And the last question, the volume of a sphere is given by this formula. The spherical balloon of radius r deflates. Okay, so that means that the rate of change is negative. That's the first thing you need to do. So the volume deflates, is getting smaller, and this is the rate. So that's dv over dt is, so this is negative 90. And then you need to differentiate. So dv over dr, I'm differentiating. 4/3 times 3 is 4 pi, and then minus 1 r squared. So I have dv over dr and I have dv over dt because the volume is deflating at the constant rate. So it says, what is the expression for dr over dt? So dr over dt. dv over dt equals dv over dr times dr over dt. That's the way the formula is set up, because you can see there's dr here, there's dr there, they cross out and they leave dv over dt. So what we have, dv over dt is negative 90, and then dv over dr is 4 pi r squared times dr over dt, which we are trying to find out. So we need to divide both sides by 4 pi r squared. So this is negative 90 over 4 pi r squared. And if you put that into your calculator, and by that I mean negative 90 over 4, so negative 90 divided by 4, you'll get negative 45 over 2 pi r squared. You're basically dividing both this by 2 and this by 2. That's the common factor between them. So minus 45 over 2 pi r squared, and that is the correct answer. And that is also the end of the practice test.